Hello, this is Sarah from the Numbers Queen podcast with world famous spiritual teacher Dan Millman. We can't introduce you in words, it's more of a vibration. I'm so excited. I almost passed out before I got on the call. I'm so delighted to be talking to you today, Dan. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Sarah. I'm glad to be here with you.
I met you about 10 years ago in Brisbane. And you probably don't know this, Dan, but after I wrote up your palmistry and numerology, I fell pregnant within a couple of weeks with my first son, and his
Oh,
original due date was your birthday.
how about that?
No ordinary moments, right?
Yes, and quite a life training having children.
I've had three, you've had three. Between us,
Yes,
I think we've had
yes.
there's a lot of evolution through children. So I've got a few questions today, but firstly, how are you?
Doing well. It's 7 p.m. here in Brooklyn, New York, and Thursday morning there in down under. So it's in Brisbane. So it's nice to reach across the miles and time zones to converse with you today.
I'm so grateful. I have some questions, and they're based on doing a bit of research on your other interviews. You're very generous with the amount that you share, and I think your focus on education is one of the reasons your work resonates with millions of people so much. This was what I wanted to open with. There was an interview with Alex Ferrari where you said part of your mission is to encourage other people to also write their lives down, whether it's a page, a paragraph, or a whole book, whether it's published or not, to share their own life to reflect back on it. Why are you so passionate about people writing their stories? And who really prompted you to start writing? Basically, was it a childhood passion? Was it something that evolved through your personal growth journey?
Well, like many high school and even college students, I was intimidated by even having to write a 10-page paper. Like, how am I going to write 10 pages on any topic? Um, so even though in one of my most demanding instructors, great humor fellow, uh, in middle school or high school, um, had us write a short story based on a piece of music or art he'd show us and said, make up a short story
Yeah.
that this resonates with. And uh, I enjoyed doing that. So that was the first discovery that, wow, when I can write whatever I want, this is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
That creative intoxication that we feel when we're doing any kind of creative writing. And the reason I mentioned that to Alex, that idea of having a mission to encourage
Yeah.
people to write their own stories, is that each of us uh, has a unique story. There's not a single story on the planet exactly like yours or mine or anyone else's, um, in terms of every detail.
Yeah.
So our stories are our treasure. And in fact, our lives are like a novel still being written, and you never know what the next chapter is going to be. So if anyone wants to write me through my website and just contact, peacefulwarrior.com/contact, I'll be happy to send a little essay I wrote encouraging people and giving the reason why I encourage people to write, whether it's a sentence or a paragraph or a page or a book, just about their life, because that is their unique perspectives and observations. Someone once said, I cannot write a book commensurate to Shakespeare, but I can write a book by me. So
I
that's why.
actually was revising that last night, and I think
Mhm.
it's one of the most healing things I've ever heard, actually, because so often we feel like we must earn the right to have a voice and to have a platform. And you're essentially saying we are born with that right.
Well, yes, anybody can share. And it's not about getting published and selling bestseller. Really, memoirs don't necessarily, unless you're a celebrity, they
Yeah.
don't sell that well. But just the process of writing. C. Day Lewis, the father of the actor Daniel Day Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
he was an essayist. And C. Day Lewis once said, I write not just in order to be understood, I write in order to understand. So that's what my essay says. We can relive our life and with the wisdom of our experience and look back on it. And that's why I think it has innate value in writing down our story.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of leads me on to my next thing. I've heard a quote that all wars were started by someone who couldn't sit quietly in a room. I think it's meant to be tongue in cheek. But I was listening to you talk about it was during the Vietnam War era, and you went past the post, and it was about I think the hungry children, and one of your mentors flipped you with an Aikido move, and he talked to you about leverage and basically conserving your energy, so that you act with kind of great intention instead of reacting to all of the, clickbait, which, let's be honest, that was years ago, but we're sort of seeing it come back, aren't we, in the world? Could you talk to me a little bit more about not getting caught up in the doom scrolling and staying in a place where
Sure.
you are an active citizen?
Sure. I mean, that story, that anecdote that I told about Socrates throwing me to the ground, and saying, notice a little leverage can be very effective. And he said, so if you want to help people, sure. This was about the paradox, the pull push between what we satirically say is navel gazing, doing
Mm-hmm.
inner work, focusing on ourselves. And there is a point in our lives, a phase, we need to focus on ourselves because that way we can develop the clarity and to exert the right leverage at the right place at the right time. So then we can be more effective in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not either or, it's both and one of
Thank
those.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I found that extremely nourishing, the way that you've stated that. And that leads me into another, I guess, observation. I found it very helpful that you made. And it was about how when we're going into this spiritual journey, there's these stages, like the childhood, adolescent, and the mature stage. And I was laughing a little bit when you talked about like the childhood stages where you're basically still looking for people to tell you what to do, and we see that lampooned a lot with new age people. And then that adolescent phase where you start to question everyone and you want to do your own thing and move out of home and play loud music. And could you just maybe outline that a little more? Because, yeah, that just made so much sense. I just really
sure,
loved that.
of course. Well, the stages of our spiritual quest um, reflect the stages of life: the childhood, adolescence, and adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Three major stages. And children, there's nothing wrong with being childlike. I mean, we need to be children before we can be adolescents and adults. But in the childhood of our spiritual quest, we look for a parent, someone who we project all power on,
Mm-hmm.
all knowledge. Children think their parents know everything. So at that phase, we may look for a guru to guide us, to tell us what to do, how to live. And that happens in the political realm as well. We need the people who want a strong parent. In adolescence, we throw off everything. We throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, and we say, only I know the best way. Well, in adolescence, we think we know everything and we're
Yeah.
bulletproof, but we eventually mature into adulthood where we don't reject just for the sake of rejecting authority figures, but we listen for wisdom anywhere, even in an old service station, petrol station. You might find someone who has some wisdom, which was the point of my first book,
Yeah.
the man I called Socrates, of course. So in adulthood, we just listen for wisdom. And I tell the story. I learned something from watching a cloud pass by through a window. I was all stressed out. It was 20 minutes to 6 when I would be getting off work. Joy was coming with the little girls to pick
Yeah.
me up for the weekend, and I wanted to get all this done. And I felt the pressure building in my head and maybe a headache coming on.
Mm-hmm.
My breathing was inhibited. And then I glanced out the window and saw a cloud floating by. And that cloud was my teacher in that moment. I said, it's not racing the wind, it's not dawdling, it's just going with the flow. And I found myself taking a deep breath, relaxing, and getting everything I needed to done in the same way. Realizing I've been stressing myself all that time. So we can learn lessons as adults, as in our maturity, from any sources.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Um, and it perfectly ties into my next question, which is when I listen to you, and I find it hard to listen to people. I'm musically trained, and if someone's even a little off key, I actually have to turn it off within a few seconds. I can listen to you. I was feeling into it, and it's almost like when I'm listening to you, it's as if I'm listening to a river or a mountain or it feels very like nature based, very anchored in love for the earth. And I don't know if you've talked about this as much, but is nature a very important part of your spiritual journey? Is it important for you to get outside and to connect with the wild? Do you hug trees? I mean,
Well, I haven't hugged a tree in a couple of weeks, but my wife Joy and I spend time in a nearby Prospect Park, which is people have heard of New York's Central Park.
uh-huh.
It's the heart of New York, really, in a way. Um, and yeah, 4 days a week we're in the park. The Japanese call it forest bathing.
Yeah.
Um, and nature has always been my primary teacher. Just
Mm.
watching trees bend in the wind and streams flow, take the shape of the currents and flow downhill. So I've always drawn my primary teachings from the world of nature, and I appreciate your asking the question. Um, so yes, in my little book, The Laws of Spirit, I meet this ageless woman sage in the mountains, and she teaches me 12 spiritual laws up in the mountains through the wilderness.
Mm.
So I do very much value um, the teachings we can find in the natural world.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you've had so many mentors, and what I love is that you're very explicit about needing help on your journey. It wasn't something given to you in a divine flash while you're in the bathtub. I always find that's a little concerning, actually, when people somehow overnight develop all this, you know what I mean, gifts. Um, this is maybe a little bit of a strange question, but it's just always stuck with me. Obviously, you would know I was incredibly inspired by the life you were born to live. And I've introduced actually thousands of people to this book, "The Life You're Born to Live" by Dan Millman, which is also a life purpose app on the internet. And I literally read about 2911s, and I actually knew my purpose. And it was so interesting because it happened around 29. I knew I needed to go into numerology and psychic work and leave behind fundraising. Um, and it was only until sort of years later that I guess you talked about Michael, who influenced you with the numerology. And it was associated with knife fighting. Is that right?
Well, I had four radically different mentors.
Yeah.
People think, who just read Way of the Peaceful Warrior or saw the movie based on the book, um, they think, oh, Dan, when he was in college, met this wise old guy named Socrates, and then he's teaching. But there was a 20-year process of preparation, studying intensely, dedicating my life pretty much with four different mentors. One I called the professor, one the guru, one the warrior priest, and one the sage, who
Yeah.
finally brought me back down to earth after living in the sky of mind for so long, and the inner journey and mysticism and so on. Um, the warrior priest, a man named Michael Bookbinder,
Mhm.
uh, gave a series of lectures. There was an advanced training on the island of Maui in Hawaii. Um, and Michael, one of the things he taught us was self-knowledge through knife fighting. And it was a martial arts oriented experience.
Yeah.
And I ended up teaching that training, I call the courage training, for 14 years. People
Mhm.
came from all over the world. I don't teach it anymore. It was
Okay.
very, very, very intense. I needed a big staff and so on. But he also, in a series of lectures, conveyed the particular approach he used, which is recognizable as numerology since it's based on one's date of birth.
Yeah.
Um, and the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Chinese, and so on. Every culture has had their different numerological systems. The Hebrews as well. Um, and he just happened to give me one that seems to be quite accurate. Now, I only had 20 pages of notes. That's all I took. I
Yeah.
typed up 20 pages of notes,
Yeah.
started doing readings for people
Hmm.
using the notes.
Yeah.
And they thought it was so spot on that I eventually internalized the information, started doing more and more readings using this understanding, this fundamental understanding, which I explain in the book,
Right.
as you know. Um, and I internalized the knowledge and gained more insight, and that's why it ended up over a 400-page reference book of all the different life paths,
Mm.
which started out 37, but after the year 2000, and now there are 45 different
Yep.
life paths for people born after, say, 1750, when the Gregorian calendar came in, which was
Hmm.
a more accurate representation of the cycles of the sun and the moon and so on. That's why it seemed to be most accurate. So
Yeah.
it was one of my tools that there's no rational way that adding up the number of your date of birth can give valid, reliable, accurate information about the core issues of your life. But as you know, Sarah, it seems to. It's one of those mysteries. It's like people tell me, well, it may work in practice, but does it work in theory? Well, I don't have a theory. Um, and many numerologists have formed theories about how it works and why.
Mm.
But nonetheless, that was my contribution to this insight. And the whole purpose is to have more compassion for oneself and other people, to see that everyone has a mountain path to climb. And we climb it in our own way, in our own time. But it's good to be aware of the hurdles and the strengths and the blessings of each individual life path.
Yeah, I'm so grateful you produced that book, and it really is a labor of love, and you can feel it in every page. And I do say to people, buy two, because the books have legs. I don't know if you've heard this story, maybe you told it to me, but every time you get this book, someone comes to your house and takes it home. It's really
Yes,
popular, and I'm so
yes.
sorry, I'm just at the end of a cold, but it's like got its own personality. It literally just strikes up a chat with whoever comes, and it's a social book. You know, I've met so many people through this book, so many good humans. And I just am so grateful you did that. And I just want to comment that surely the universe has made a very intentional decision to co-create this book with you, because it doesn't feel like a book that anyone could just produce. And in fact, moving into the age of AI, I'm actually a little sad. I wonder if we're going to have less books like this coming forwards, because you can clearly see sort of every blood, sweat, and tear stain in that book.
Well, it was a very, very challenging book to write. I had the help of an editor to help me organize it
Yeah.
and structure it. That was so important. Uh, yeah, and I'm satisfied with that. And the other books I've written, 18 over 40 years. Um, and my culminating work was the memoir about the four mentors,
Yeah.
um, to share that, as you said, I didn't find it under a leaf. I didn't go into a divine coma and come up with everything I teach. Um,
You didn't go to a
but
weekend workshop
no,
and just instantly become Dan Millman. Or yeah,
right.
it's like I really respect that. I really respect the fact that you've dedicated your life to this cause. I want to be like that, and I really want my children to watch this video and understand the power of process. And I know it sounds really old fashioned, and I've been called boring, because I still do my numerology charts by hand. And I feel like the hands are the tips of your angel wings. And even when I write everything out by hand first,
Mhm.
not just typing. Is that something you do? Are you like someone who writes by hand still?
Well, I haven't developed a calligraphy. When I used to take notes in college, I had to type them up as soon as I got home because I could barely read my handwriting. So, and I was a very good typist. However, it is recommended you learn more and you process more writing by hand. My daughter, Sierra, who's a writer as well,
Yeah.
she writes everything by hand.
Oh, how
So
lovely.
I think that's probably the best way. It just didn't work for me. So,
Oh, no, I
one of the
understand. And it's not one size fits all, is it? I'm
no.
curious, how has the life path work impacted? Because you've had a very long, beautiful marriage to Joy. You've got three daughters, you've got five grandchildren. Have you actually done their life paths with them? Is it just assumed knowledge, or have you actually ever sat down with them? I was just kind of curious.
Well, my grandchildren are, the young ones are 11, I'm sorry, 12. She just turned 12, 12, 9, and 6.
Yeah.
I don't recommend doing life paths with children because it puts them in a box, like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Hmm.
Let them just be kids, grow up, and if they're ever, in their teens, if they're interested, what is this about? Well, then I'll explain to them and talk to them about it.
Sure.
Um, as far as the grown grandchildren, um, no, I never actually sat down with them. It just didn't feel appropriate
Okay.
uh, to do.
No, I
So,
understand, and yeah, there's no, I just wasn't, I was just curious. I personally do life paths for children to help their parents.
yeah,
And we always do it with a lot of love, and we always emphasize free will and that it's very important to keep an open mind and to really track the child and use intuition first. Numerology should only ever be a support, technique.
sure.
Mm.
Well, as the sage or as the warrior priest once said, the mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open.
One of my favorite ones is keep your mind open, but not so open your brain falls out.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm sorry, we are coming, yeah, towards the end. And, I'm sniffling my way through this interview. In your TEDx talk at Berkeley, which is really funny, can I say? Um, you mentioned that even having a cold can be a turning point for some people for life reflection. Do you get sick, Dan? And how do you speak to yourself when you are ill? I mean, has this changed over time? Have you become more compassionate towards yourself when you're human?
Oh yeah, of course, like anybody. Once in a while, I get sick. My wife and I, the three key issues are regular, moderate, balanced exercise,
Yeah.
um, a nutritious diet, eating a little more of what's good for you, a little less of what's not, and enough rest, enough sleep. Those three things help support our health. And so I don't get ill that often, but
Mhm.
sure I get colds. You know how some people say I have
Right.
a cold, other people say I'm having a cleansing crisis.
Oh, that's
Depends
true,
how we
isn't it? Yeah.
frame it. But of course I get colds occasionally, and I've gotten COVID twice.
Oh no.
Both times on the road traveling. Once I
Oh,
was speaking in Germany. I came home,
yeah.
brought COVID home to my wife, my dear
Oh
wife.
gosh.
Yeah, a souvenir that neither one of us would have chosen. And then recently, I was down in the Bahamas and teaching again. So these things can happen, but you're right. When I have a cold, it really helps me appreciate good, health, right? You can relate
Yes.
to that, free of symptoms. Um, and I'm going to turn 80 years old in February.
Mm.
So every day I wake up, nothing hurts is a blessing. Um, any elder can relate to that. So yes, it's all part of the process of being human.
I'm really grateful you said that. And I'm just going to take a very quick break to blow my nose off camera. Could you just give
Sure,
me 10 secs?
of course.
And I just want to say that's probably one of the most helpful things you could have said because I have been on and off sick with respiratory issues for many years,
Mm.
probably since childhood. And I've always felt like I've failed. I haven't raised my vibration enough. I haven't got the spiritual
Oh,
lesson, you know?
no, no. Sometimes you just catch something. I mean, germs are all around. Sometimes our immune system's up, sometimes it's a bit down. Um, so making meanings of it only complicates our lives. Something you get a cold, you take care of yourself, you get well. Joy's sister is a nurse, and she used to say, if you get a cold and you don't do anything for it, it can take, like it can take a week to get better. But if you do everything right, it only takes 7 days. So
That's genius.
yeah,
I have to say, as a mother of small children who's the breadwinner, I've just always felt like I should be doing more self-care. And you just always have a laundry list of things. But I mean, literally, I get to meditate for a few minutes a day. And luckily, you're someone you got the 4 minute meditation and workouts and thank goodness, because I mean, I just don't think I could cope if it was any more than a few minutes. One of my children would not have shoes on.
if daily life is a form of spiritual weight training, which I think it is, if you don't lift any weights, you don't get any stronger. And raising children um, is one of the greatest life trainings there are.
Mm.
You can't, I mean, I have great admiration for anyone because I didn't have three kids at the same time. I was married once. We had raised a daughter, a lovely daughter I speak with every week. She's on in the West Coast in California, across the country from us. But we have two daughters right here within 15-minute walk with the three grandchildren, the little ones. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's a challenge even in the best of times. They say insanity is hereditary. We get it from our kids.
I believe you have three children. One of the
Yes,
quotes that it keeps me going in those dark times is two children is two children, three children is 15.
exactly. It's not just one more.
I have
Um,
had to enlist the help of strangers, in public at times because when they split, it's three ways, it's not two ways.
oh no, no, absolutely. um, John Wilmot, it's attributed to him. He said, "Before I was married, I had three theories about children. Now I have three children and no theories."
I am so grateful there are people like that in the world because I really, it just floats my boat. We're almost at the
Yes.
end, but you know, I am a single parent, and there's a lot of single parents these days, and basically they are still training the world's future peaceful warriors. But is there some adaptation they could maybe make when they're trying to be, fit, strong, healthy, perfect individuals? I mean, what's the adaptation when you are basically the plan A, plan B, and plan C?
Well, there is no perfection in parenting. You can do very well at success at work. It's objectively measurable and this and that. But children, we always, by definition, fail. But we make our failures as small as we can. We learn from it. If we're open with our kids, Albert Schweitzer said, in influencing other people, example is not the main thing. It's the only thing.
Wow.
And so by being a good example, they're looking at you and they're saying, Mom is alone. She's having to take care of us. They will look back on that with gratitude one day. It won't show when they're teenagers, of course. But
Thanks for the warning.
yes.
We're starting to close, but I I wanted to share. I've been preparing for this interview for such a long time, and in the
Mhm.
last couple of days, I did something I never thought I could do. It's a bit of a strange story, but I'll tell you if that's okay, Dan. I was out in public with my children, and a grandfather came in, and we were at a sports event, and he was in a very bad mood, and he was screaming, and he was hitting a very small child in front of me. I am from a Chinese culture, and we are generally taught not to interfere. Um, but I had to say something, and I did. And may I say that when I called him on it, everyone suddenly found something to do on their phones, and I had to assess the situation. I actually had to assess. I'm like, if he decks me, which is like, takes you out, I'm like, there's a camera, there's people, and I'm a bit taller than him. We should be all right. I found myself thinking like a warrior in that moment, and I'm not looking for praise, but I didn't know I had that in me. And
Mm,
and he called me a Karen, which I'm not sure if you're aware is a pejorative term for women these
sure.
days, as
Yes.
much as I think it's a beautiful name. And it was very confusing for my children because my children, one of them's autistic, and he says, Mummy, your name's not Karen. Are you changing it to Karen? Why is he calling you Karen?
Yes,
Well,
children
well,
take
I'm
things
trying to talk
literally.
this guy down off a ledge, essentially. And
Hmm.
I wanted to just close because you've got this thing about paradox. And I had this moment where I was sort of in hysterical laughter from my children doing this kind of David Attenborough narration of mummy taking on this person. And then the man actually telling me some very nasty things in public. And I don't know why, but I just wanted to say I felt there was some relationship to this conversation. I felt in myself that I have been silent for a long time on many matters that are important to me. And this was right in front of my children. And I'd like to say I do it all the time, but I don't, Dan. This was a really big breakthrough for me. And I don't know why. I just wanted to share it with you and say thank you. I just felt
It's
like you would
perfect.
understand.
Yes, it is perfect that you shared that story. That's why I say each of us is a peaceful warrior in training, striving to live with a peaceful heart, but also acknowledging there are times we need a warrior spirit, which you demonstrated in calling out this guy, that his behavior was inappropriate. You stepped forward and you did what your heart told you to do, and I think that's admirable. But I don't always rise to the occasion. None of us do. We
Yeah.
do the best we can. You know, two steps forward, one step back. That's how life goes.
Dan, do you have any parting words for people who are watching who um they're scared to have children? Because I every now and then you meet those people and they're like, oh, climate change and world war, and they're like, oh, it's the right thing not to have children, not to cause more harm to the earth. And I'm like, what? Children are awesome. I'm Chinese. The first thing I did when my kids were born would check if they had children's lines and spouse lines. But what's your advice for people who are a little afraid to kind of receive more?
Well, I can't, I'm not in a position, I respect people's process, and we're
That's a
all
good
living and
point.
learning. So I wouldn't suggest people should have children.
Of course,
For those
yes.
who don't want to, then they shouldn't. We don't want children coming into the world unwelcome. So, um, but if there's fear, there's doubt, that's something we need to overcome. It's a hurdle we're here in front of
Yeah.
us that we need to break through, whatever it is, whether it's having children or doing anything else, taking a risk, a new job, or moving somewhere. So whatever it is, um, I'll close with a quote that by Cus D'Amato, a boxing coach. He said, "Heroes and cowards feel exactly the same fear. They just respond differently."
I read that last night
Hmm.
and I
How about
actually
that?
like saved it because I want to bring that into the interview.
Wow. Well,
I'm
perfect.
I just wanted to apologize for what I just asked, and I want to apologize to anyone who may have felt I was pigeonholing people. And what I actually should have done is framed it as I was afraid to have children, Dan. I was an environmental activist, and I'm sorry to everyone. I'm going to just clean it up right now. I was afraid of having children. It was
Well,
my
look how
greatest
well
fear.
that turned out.
So far, so good. They're a riot. They're an absolute
I'll bet.
circus, and I know you've taught circus, so you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Three ring circus. Yes.
Um, what an absolute privilege to be able to spend some time with you. Thank you for all your contributions and the opportunity to have such an intimate and detailed conversation. I can't wait to get this out to the community. Where can people find your work? I know you're not traveling so much, but can you just let us know if you're planning some more online events and things like that?
Well, anyone can drop by if they're curious about my work to peacefulwarrior.com. And everything is there. They can join my free email list. I send out it once a month. I send out a newsletter with favorite quotations and reminders about life. And there are my books and audios, and everything is at the website. So, and even the life purpose calculator. So um,
Absolutely. And I
that's
believe
where
you
to
are
find
also
me.
offering one-on-one sessions, which is quite a special thing.
Occasionally,
Yeah.
I'm able to fit in time for a one-on-one Zoom via Zoom. Yeah.
Dan, absolute gratitude for being on this planet. So glad you chose Earth. I'm so glad that we incarnated at the same time. And just so many blessings to you and your lovely family.
I appreciate the invitation. It's been a pleasure, Sarah.
Thank
Take
you. This has
care.
been Sarah from the Numbers Queen podcast with world famous spiritual teacher Dan Millman. Until next time, I'll see you all later, beautiful 1111 angels. Take care. Bye.